Hi, everyone, and thanks so much for listening to this week's episode of the Admit One podcast, where we interview students who have successfully navigated the college admission process and earned their ticket to college. This week, we are going to be interviewing Muna, who is a senior at Westview High School in San Diego, California. She has recently been admitted to UCLA for the fall, where she will be studying mechanical engineering. So Muna, thanks so much for joining us today. Excited to talk to you a little bit about your journey through high school and learn more about how you ended up at UCLA.
Of course. Yeah, I'm excited.
Awesome. So tell me a little bit about your school. Tell me a little bit about your the high school that you went to, and maybe some of the classes that you took, and then we can kind of take the conversation from there.
Yeah, so I'd say that in my district, my high school is known as probably one of the more competitive high schools. So there's a lot of academic opportunities, and athletic opportunities and opportunities in general for all of the students. So for me, all the opportunities I took kind of related to STEM, such as the classes I took. So I took I'd say a vast majority of the AP classes I took were tied to STEM in some way or another. And then also my school offers a lot of they call it CTE classes, which stands for Career Technical Education, which are classes that are geared towards pursuing a certain career. So I took a lot of classes that are in the engineering pathway, and yeah, so I'd say that my school is pretty competitive and a lot of STEM students. So there's a lot of good opportunities for STEM that I feel like I took advantage of with my classes.
Yeah, definitely. Walk me through, because you have a pretty rigorous curriculum that you take all the way through high school. Walk me through, like, sort of some of the classes that you took, and some of the things, especially as they relate to STEM. Like, how did the kind of that trajectory pan out for you?
I'd say that my freshman year of high school, since that was online, I took a lot of general classes that like all students take to satisfy credits. But probably in my sophomore year is when I started taking classes that were more so related to STEM. So those were that's the time when I took my first AP classes. So I took
Hmm.
two in my sophomore year. I took calculus AB, which was like, and then I took the rest of the math classes, and then I took psychology, which was less of related to engineering, but more I just took it because I was interested in it. Um, so that was my sophomore year, but my junior year I definitely took some more STEM related classes. So that was the first year I took took an engineering pathway class from the CTE classes. So I took honors principles of engineering. And then with all the other STEM classes I took calculus BC, then I took AP statistics, and then AP chemistry. So that was my junior year, and there's other like general classes I took like history and English. But then in my senior year, I took probably I think the most AP classes. I took four. So I took both of the physics C classes, so mechanics and E&M. I did AP biology, and then oh yeah, then this is my first, and then this year I took my first like non-STEM class, AP class. So I took AP English language and composition. So I took about nine AP classes and then I also took a CNC class this year as well. So computer integrated manufacturing, where we use the CNC machines in our robotics rooms. So out of eight out of the nine classes I took in high school that were AP classes were STEM related, and then I took two engineering pathway classes.
And then what was your math for your senior year?
So because I already maxed out all the math classes at my school, I was considering taking multivariable at like a different community college, but I decided since Physics C had calculus in it, it would probably keep up my calculus knowledge, and I didn't want to overwhelm myself too much by taking another like more difficult math class.
Yeah, that makes sense. I've talked to a couple other students so far over the last couple podcasts where they take multivariable or linear algebra, but I think another alternative is certainly to take Physics C at during the senior year, and especially because you said during your junior year you're taking Calc BC and AP Stats, so you're already maxed out within your math courses before you even get into
Yeah.
your senior year. So it's like sometimes I feel like the advice that I'll give people feel like, okay, I have to take multivariable or I have to do linear or everything is like I must do it this way. There's always
Yeah.
alternative ways to navigate it. It's just kind of
Yeah.
thinking about, if you weren't taking a math class and you were taking basket weaving or something like that instead, like maybe we would say, I don't think this is going to work, but because
Yeah.
you're taking probably your most rigorous curriculum as a senior, it definitely makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
So that's a good
Yeah.
thought process. And then talk to me a little bit about from an extracurricular standpoint, because you have a lot of really significant extracurriculars that develop over time. But do you remember as a freshman, as you begin your high school journey, are there extracurriculars that you're particularly drawn to? Are there things that do you have like a plan as you kind of start high school, or does everything just sort of organically take shape?
Um, I'd say that what I came into high school thinking I was gonna do was not at all how I left. So, for example, I came into high school hating science and never wanting to take a science class. Then I took all three of the science classes at my school. So I'd say I didn't really have a plan. I'd say
Mm-hmm.
the year that I started to have an actual plan was my sophomore year. So my freshman year, the only extracurricular I had was speech and debate because all the extracurriculars that I was interested in, it would be kind of weird online. So speech and debate was just something I was interested in. That was kind of when, because in my freshman year, I thought I wanted to be a lawyer, so I thought that maybe speech and debate would be something to go into that.
Mm-hmm.
And I enjoyed it. I did it up to my junior year, but then I felt in my senior year there was other things I wanted to pursue that, so I ended up like cutting that out of my like extracurricular list.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then, but then at my sophomore year is when the extracurriculars that I really enjoyed started to develop. So that's when I joined my robotics team. And then I joined Black Student Union. Actually, I joined Black Student Union. They were looking for an exec role. So I joined the club with an executive position, which was interesting. Um, and
Yeah, you
then
don't see that very often. Usually there needs to be like
yeah,
there's a little bit of involvement first. So that's
yeah,
good though. Yeah.
yeah. And then in my freshman the late of my freshman year, I picked up an internship at Council of American Islamic Relations, and I've been continuing that internship through my senior year as well. So my sophomore year, I had kind of three big extracurriculars. There's probably some
Mm-hmm.
like small things sprinkled in, but those are the three things that I kept up all through high school.
Yep.
Um, and I
So
developed like my yeah. Go ahead.
yeah, so a couple like kind of touch points because you have a lot of interesting points that you just made that I think are really
Yeah.
important. The first is coming into high school and not necessarily having a very firm plan on what exactly I'm going to do. I wish that more students would have that because
Hmm.
I feel like a lot of times people feel like, okay, this is the plan, and they'll get into it for a year or two, and suddenly they'll be like, I don't want to do this anymore, but they feel like they're obligated at 15 years old to like have their
Yeah.
entire lives figured out. So what
Yeah.
was it about? Because you had said that you didn't necessarily have any interest in taking a science class. When did that change? Like, is it a teacher that you have? Is it a class that you take? Like, what sort of changes that trajectory and the mindset for you?
I'd say it was probably robotics that made me want to go down. Like, I joined robotics as a mechanical engineer, and I knew I wanted to do mechanical engineering. So like my school like has basic science continue to achieve. So I knew that I had to take some science classes, but when I came to high school, I was going to take the basic ones. So in my sophomore year, the first science class I ever took was a regular chemistry class. So I think the interest in that class, and then also my interest in mechanical engineering, had me researching what does mechanical engineers need? So they said they needed physics, chemistry, not so much biology, but I joined biology like for a different reason, which I can get into a bit later.
Mm-hmm.
But like that's kind of what made me choose my path. Like I knew that I wanted to go into some type of engineering, and I knew that engineering is a very sciencey, mathy field. So I wanted to expose myself to all the different types of sciences, so I could decide what engineering I wanted to go to because I knew I liked engineering from robotics, but I wasn't sure if I wanted to do mechanical engineering. But I
Yep.
decided that later on. But I knew I wanted to try to see what everything has to offer. So like my dad, he's a chemical engineer, so I was like maybe I'll enjoy AP chemistry. So then I joined AP chemistry in my junior year. I did physics in my senior year because I feel like physics is like a engineering, like a basic.
Mm-hmm.
And then yeah, biology I joined because I thought maybe I could go into biomedical engineering. So then I chose biology. So I kind of I knew that I wanted to do science because of engineering, and I did all the different sciences so I could figure out what type of engineering I wanted to go into.
That's a good way to think about it too. I mean, I think sometimes people feel like, especially in high school, because you're taking basic level courses, so it isn't as if there's a ton of interdisciplinary learning. But one of the things that like colleges put an emphasis on a lot of times is like, how do you pursue things in an interdisciplinary way? And so for you to be able to start to think about that, like think critically about it early, I mean, I think that plays a role even within
Yeah.
the review process, which is cool.
Yeah.
And then, so tell me a little bit about. I want to jump into kind of your last point that you had made from an extracurricular standpoint about your internship with the Council of Islamic Relations. Like, how do you get that internship? What's your role? Because it's sustained throughout your 3 years, which is amazing. And so, talk to me about like how did that all come about, and what role did you play within it?
Um, so the internship just kind of like wasn't something I applied for. It just kind of came with it. But what I first started with was, I think in 2020 there was a lot of civil unrest, and I was really curious about like how I could learn about it. Because again, like although like I'm interested in engineering, a lot of my some of my extracurriculars are related to activism, and that was kind of when I was interested in it. So my Arabic teacher when I was in from elementary to middle school, quit her job to go work at the CARE, which is the Council of Islamic Relations, and she was a government like official also in San Diego. But she still goes to the mosque that I go to like go and pray and learn. So I went to her during one of the Friday prayers and asked her about her role and her job, and I was wondering like, is there anything that a student could do? Is there any like anything that I could try to do to learn about it. And she told me about this thing called Muslim Day at the Capitol, which is essentially like something that CARE California does in order to like pass certain bills or agendas that they want to learn about. So in the year that I did it, one of the bills was to stop a lot of the tear gassing people. So um, I learned about that bill, and then I attended the Muslim Day at the Capitol. I got on a Zoom meeting and I kind of advocated for this bill and how I think it would help people. And then I think that bill passed unanimously on the floor that day. So that's kind of how I started that. And I knew that because Muslim Day at the Capitol is just like one day, but I knew it was really interesting. So I asked my Arabic teacher again, is there anything I can do that's like longer? And she offered me an internship, and I worked a lot of there the summertime. And then over the years, I was more of a general intern. I worked with like some things with the U.S. Census by going to different mosques and like asking them about like where they lived and their religion in order to get more representation for Muslims in California. I also did a lot of. I worked with making high schools across like San Diego to have more MSAs, which is like Muslim Student Associations. But then over the years, I had a specific role as a communications intern. So I worked with social media, and making weekly newsletters. So that's kind of where I am right now.
I mean, this is I try to explain this to the students. If there's students listening right now, like this is the kind of thing that I'm trying to explain to you as far as like the trajectory of what your involvement looks like. First thing is like, just ask, right? Like if you feel like there's something that you're interested in being a part of, ask somebody if you're able to do it. The second thing that I would think a little bit about is stay involved in the things that you're involved with. Oftentimes, I think there's in students' lives nowadays, like it's a lot different from when I was growing up, but like when I was growing up, it would be like, okay, open the doors, we go outside, we play. There's not a lot of structure to the things that like I was doing. But for kids nowadays, pretty much everything is done within like some kind of structured environment, or like you're part of a program, or you sign up to work in this with this group and things like that. And so there ends up being a lot of students' experiences that are really, really similar because they're doing things within the context of their high school or the context of like their student group and that kind of thing. What you do is you see things that you're interested in. And I think this is like kind of a theme. It sounds like for what your profile is and what your experience through high school is. You see things that you're interested in, and then you say like, how can I get engaged in it a little bit more? And then when you get engaged in a little bit more, you get engaged in it even more, and you raise the bar, and you continually think about how do I figure out what my level of involvement is in these things. And that's exactly what students need to be able to do. And I think it's hard for kids because so much, like I was saying, so much of the things are, since they were born, it's done within the context of like, their peer group and different organizations, and everything's sort of like structured for them. But if you can remove yourself from that context and do things that are independent and individualized, I think that's where there's like an amazing opportunity for you to not only from a experiential standpoint, but also to build your resume and to have experiences that other people don't have, and all of that. So I think that's fantastic. And the
Yeah,
sustained participation in it is
yeah.
really cool too.
Thank you.
I also want to go back to one of the points that you had made about not doing speech and debate as a junior, and maybe just give people like your thought process on that, because I think a lot of times kids might, or maybe you did it through your junior and you didn't do it your senior year.
Yeah, I dropped
So
my senior year.
okay, so talk to me about like what your mindset was on that. Did you were you nervous that it would affect like your college application? Like you have several key elements of your profile that we'll talk about when you get ready, when we talk about your essays. But I think sometimes people are really apprehensive to drop something because they feel like I have to do it all the way through high school. I don't think that that's accurate at all. I think you need to do, if you're going to drop something, then you need to like increase your involvement in other things and that sort of thing. But like, what's your thought process as you decide not to do it? Were you nervous about that? Like, what was the thought there?
Um, well, I just kind of felt like out of all the extracurriculars I was doing, speech and debate was the thing I spent the least time doing.
Mm-hmm.
And it was just because I wasn't, because now that I found a passion in engineering, it didn't really align with who I was. So in my, freshman year, I was really into it. I was going to every meeting, I was attending competitions, all this stuff. But then in my senior and my sophomore and junior year, I was going to every other meeting, wasn't really competing. I was only kind of using it as a way to improve my public speaking. Um, and I thought that was good because I feel like speech and debate really helped me grow as a person in terms of being able to speak better, to deliver speeches, which I feel like I've had to do a lot in my senior year now that I was a part of a lot of activist groups that involve a lot of communication. But I also picked up a job, so like the speech and debate meetings were like interfering with the days that I had shifts, and it was just like I feel like in my senior year I had a lot of really cool exec roles and opportunities and so many things going on, but speech and debate just wasn't something that was fulfilling me anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't want to waste my time doing something I didn't enjoy anymore when I could spend more time doing other things that I really enjoyed. I was a bit nervous, like I did have that same fear that it would change something, but I felt like because I feel like if I could go back and do my applications again, I feel like I could have just taken speech and debate off and it wouldn't you really have even done anything because it wasn't really something that I had a huge impact in. So
Yep.
I feel like it wouldn't be too big of a difference if I wasn't in it.
Yeah, I use the word elite all the time. I talk about this with students. Is like I don't, and we'll talk about your activity, like your the essays and stuff in a minute. But I don't need you to have 20 essays and honors and awards in your UC application or a full 10 in your Common App. I don't really need that to happen. I need you to have like 3 essays or short answer or extended essay like components, like narratives that are elite comparatively to your peers. And what I really mean by that is unique, so that it's something that I maybe haven't seen before, or that is specific to you, or that you've been able to demonstrate your ability to think critically on things. Like that's what we're really looking for. And I think there's this idea oftentimes with students that I need to do a million different things. And it's like, I'm going to, have a resume that an admission officer is going to look at and be like amazed by, but you're not even sending in a resume. We're primarily looking at what your short answer and extended essay questions are. So from my perspective, like I think that you're absolutely right. It's not that it's like doesn't do anything for you, because I hear all the time, does this count? Everything counts, but it's more about like how is your level of involvement in it different from other people? And if it's just you're participating, then it's present in your application, but it's not necessarily at an elite level. So I think that's a fair assessment. Talk to me about, let's get into, and we'll, like I said, we'll talk about your essays. So we'll talk more about a couple more, like your robotics and your involvement in the Black Student Union and things like that, because those are pieces of your essays. But talk to me a little bit about, as you start thinking about your college applications and like you're building your list and things like that. Like, what are some of the things that you're thinking about? Are you primarily looking to stay in California? Are you looking out of state? Like, what are the approaches that you're taking there?
So, like, I'm not sure if you were able to see like the list of all the schools I applied to, but I applied, yeah, like I applied to mostly in-state.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I only applied to maybe two or three out-of-state schools, and I think I only did that because a lot of people were making me feel a bit nervous about just applying in-state. But
Mm-hmm.
I feel like California has a lot of schools to offer, and I can understand maybe me applying out of state if I lived somewhere with not many schools. But my dream school was UCLA. I was also interested in Berkeley and UCSD and all these different schools, and they're all in state, and
Yep.
the tuition was good. I just felt like in state was better for me. Also, I really something I considered was also like weather because I feel like I'm very like sensitive to different weather changes, and I didn't really want to
I
live
mean,
somewhere very cold.
You're in San Diego. It's hard to
Yeah,
like, yeah, it's hard for me to imagine me being like, yeah, come across the country. You're going to live in Boston, Massachusetts
yeah,
for the winter. Like, I don't know.
yeah,
That seems a little crazy. So I definitely get that. That definitely makes sense.
yeah.
Um, so then as you get ready to start applying, like when are you starting to sort of work on essays and put together like your PIQs and stuff like that?
I actually looked back up my PIQs like the history, and it seems that like by the beginning of my senior year, I had all of them written out. They weren't all like to word count, and they also definitely went through changes, but I had at least 350 words for all of the PIQs. So when I finished my summer, I also finished most of my activity list. I didn't input any grades into the UC Common App or anything like that, but I had, and then my Common App essay came later, but I would say that I was theoretically like ready to apply to the UCs by the end of August because I had everything ready. So that was when I had to finish the UCs.
This is a theme of this podcast of students who are very successful in the admission process. A very normal theme is start early, and students tend to be done earlier. So, one big piece of advice that most students are giving, and you're echoing, is like, just for context, the UC application is not due until November 30th. So, Muna's basically saying she's got her content drafts done and, a good foundation for her activity list by the end of August, which is months before the deadline. So the starting early is huge.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I recommend it because I knew that my senior year would be quite overwhelming. And although like I had activities I was doing in the summertime, it wasn't near to the like doing activities in school and stuff. So like in the summertime I had like a lab internship, but I was only there from maybe 7 to 3. Sometimes I was there from 7 to 7 just because I liked going there. But
Mhm.
usually like I'd have time in between like me waiting for different like results, or sometimes I'd put things into the machine and then have to like finish doing whatever it's doing in there. So I have like a half an hour to an hour. So I would just kind of do things there and there. I'd finish like the activity list. I would say the PIQs took the longest time just because I feel like it's very overwhelming to choose like questions and then write something about your life. But I found what I wanted to say in July and then drafted it out in August. So that's kind of my timeline. And I do recommend to start early, especially because probably if you're applying to like a top 20 school, you're probably going to have a pretty overwhelming senior year as well. And it's just good to start early. I wouldn't say necessarily you need to start like the day after junior year ends. Like I'd say that you need time to rest.
Yeah.
But I get really antsy like over the summertime just because eventually after I get relaxed, I get bored really quickly. So I just like to, and I like to write a lot too. Like writing is something I'm interested in. So I just like I found it interesting to write the PIQs. So I like
Yeah.
doing it.
You're not going to get less busy entering your senior year. So take advantage of the time when it's on your side. And let's maybe that's probably a good time to pull up a couple of essays and kind of go through and talk a little bit about those. So, talk to me a little bit about your approach. Your first essay is on robotics and your involvement with that. I have a couple of points that I will make about these essays that I think you do a really good job with. But talk to me a little bit about like the way you kind of attack this and the way you think about it.
Um, so I think something that's interesting about my robotics journey, um, is how it changed me as a leader. And I came into high school very quiet and shy, and I think I left high school very extroverted, which I think was a very big change. And I think a lot of that was from robotics. And I think something unique about my robotics journey is that I actually wanted to drop the club in my sophomore year just because I felt very quiet and scared. All of it was new to me. All the machines. I'm in mechanical engineering. There's all these huge machines and it's hard to use, and you have to ask questions. And I was just really nervous. So I think this PIQ was the one asking about like leadership and how are you a leader.
Mhm.
So in this one, I talked about how at the end of my first semester, I wanted to drop the club, but we had a mock competition, and my team built a little arm. And when we won that competition, it just really inspired me about the community that my team could offer me because everyone was so excited and everyone was like hugging each other, and it just seemed like everyone was kind, and I think I was over imagining who they were. I knew, and then they're all students at the end of the day, and I should have asked questions earlier. So from there, I started to reach out more. I involved myself a lot in the competition. Um, I was a part of the design team, which is a core group of like 5 students who basically build the whole robot. And from there, I changed entirely. And then I took on more leadership roles. I became vice president in my junior year, and I talked about all the different things I do in the club in here. And at the very end, I tied it off as a very like roundabout like moment of being like me, the next year being I think a mechanical student lead, so I was supposed to teach all the students for the machines. And there is a student who looks very similar to I looked like a year ago, looking very nervous and confused, and then I helped them with one of the machines. And I thought it was an interesting way to end the essay.
Yeah, I think it's great. I think there's a couple of themes that you'll see in all of your essays that you do a really good job with, which is for especially for UCs, you have 350 words, and so we want to see those you utilize those words as effectively as possible and be as direct and clear about what you did and what your accomplishments were and what you're proud of and successes and all of those things. So, for example, this paragraph where you say, alongside my fellow exec board, we work tirelessly to ensure the success of our team, whether it be organizing outreach events or developing strategies in order to support all 100 of our team members. I've helped our organization to establish partnerships with neighboring schools, run STEAM fairs, hosting workshops. Our contributions to the community led us to winning the Engineering Inspiration Award at regionals, which took our team to world championships in 2023. So like you're utilizing those words in that you're telling them there's 100 team members. We established partnerships. We run fairs, host workshops, and we had success within the competitions. That's a lot that you get done within like, I don't know, 75 words, 80 words, something like that. So to
Mm-hmm.
utilize your words as effectively as possible is really important. And then we'll talk about your other essay here too. But also to think about, especially with the UCs, like don't think about them as individual entities, but think about it more so as like what's the overall plan of like what are the pieces of my puzzle that I'm trying to highlight. And so think about what are the maybe 3 or 4 things that I think are most significant to me, and that's going to be what you want to prioritize. And this is a good example of sort of like your development as a student as well, where you talk about, I mean, you open where you say AP chemistry was a wrecking ball that no one could ever prepare for, and then you get into essentially how you overcame the challenges that you initially maybe felt with AP chemistry, and then it transitioned you into really loving the field. So talk to me a little bit about kind of the approach here too on this one.
Um, so this is about the internship I did over the summertime of my junior year, which I mentioned previously. So I interned at an laboratory at SDSU, where basically like I had a partner, and we were assigned a research project. And the one that we did was surrounded around 3D printing and additive manufacturing. I kind of described it into, I don't want to go into like all the words of it, but
Yeah.
essentially like when I was doing the project, I was really nervous because the uh, lab was about mechanical engineering, and mechanical engineering to me, I kind of think physics like immediately, and I had taken a physics class up to that point, and I was really nervous that I was not going to know anything. But on the first day, my the lab like leader, the leader of the lab, the doctorate who was there, the professors, they asked about um, things that were words that I recognized from chemistry. And I was like, wait, this like I didn't realize this class would be so helpful to me. And I
Hmm.
used a lot of the knowledge from that class for all of the research papers we read, for the approaches we had. I mean, all of it, honestly, I would say was more chemistry based than physics based, and that was really interesting to me. And I kind of, and it was interesting to see this class that was quite difficult for me, but I feel like I performed well in, to be applied, and it made it that much more interesting. And although the class is difficult, I found that I was falling in love with chemistry just over and over again because I just thought it was all so intriguing in the in the like in this like area, the way
Yeah.
that it was framed in the lab.
Yeah, I think it's great because it also goes back to kind of what we had talked about earlier with the idea that things are interdisciplinary and being able to pull ideas out of different fields that maybe you wouldn't have necessarily identified as like, okay, this is directly associated with it. And so I think from a college standpoint, I would look at this and think like, oh, this is a great way for a student to recognize ways that they can utilize things from various fields within their field of interest and how everything relates, right? And so this is a great piece to your puzzle here too. And then we want to touch on one more essay. This last one, talking a little bit about your involvement in the Black Student Union and talking about your internship that we've discussed. And so if you want to give a little bit of an overview of what you're trying to talk about, which obviously we talked a little bit about these things too, but talk to me a little bit about kind of how you approach this one too.
Okay, so this one, I knew that a lot of the things that I talked about a lot in my activity list were related to activism. So currently, like I do like 4 things that related to activism, and that's in care, Black Student Union, something in robotics, and then another committee that I joined after college apps were due. So that doesn't really relate. But for this one, I talked about how first I just talked about how why I was even interested in the first place, and the way I started was just going to a few protests in 2020, and then from there, I joined CARE. I started interning there and making social media content and going to Muslim Day at the Capitol. And then that was all kind of in the summer between my freshman and sophomore year. So then sophomore year started, and I started going to school in person. And that's when I, joined Black Student Union, eventually getting the presidential role, and talked about how I did that in how that like related to my school and my community. And then I founded and led my robotics team's diversity committee because our club definitely like could do with a bit more diversity in all aspects. And I talked about how I first tried to implement more diversity training in my my team, and then also implementing it to like middle schools across my district. And that was kind of all the different ways that I was interested in it. And I kind of ended it being like, well, everywhere I go, it seems like there's some effort from me to implement diversity, and how I did that because I knew how it felt to be like alone. So I wanted to talk about how I can make it easier for others to break into fields that seem difficult to join because there aren't people who look like them.
Yep. One thing I think you do, again, going back to like being as direct and clear as possible. In this essay, you do a great job where you say, I took up the presidential position in the Black Student Union. I was able to organize events celebrating Black culture by promoting Black owned businesses and setting up fun games in my school's plaza during surrounding Black artists and styles. I also intertwined my love for engineering with my passion for diversity by giving annual presentations for my robotics team on notable Black STEM trailblazers. So there's a tendency a lot of times for high school students to make claims in their writing without supporting evidence, where they'll say, I took up the presidential role and had a lot of new events. but there's no like, what were the events? What happened within those? What were the plans? And so you do a really good job in this of being as direct and clear as possible. You also just have a great line earlier in the essay that I want to say, which is, I tentatively joined a few protests and was thrust into a state of constant motion. Rather than remaining stagnant, I learned to thrash against confines to create change. That's an awesome line. So that's just great. That's just great writing. I just wanted to bring a point on that. So I think you do just a really good job with this of being direct, being clear, talking about what your experiences are, and making sure that the reader understands very clearly of like, what happened. So there's no claims. It's not just claims with supporting evidence. It's really clear guidance or direction of how you approach things and what your thought process was, what your roles were. And I think as you approach UC applications in general, that would be a primary point of emphasis that I would give to any student as they start that process. Awesome. Well, I want to be cognizant of time here, Muna, and also want to leave. Usually, we like to get just a feel for if you, looking back on your college application process. Obviously, it went really well for you, or you're ending up going to the school that you wanted to go to, which is amazing. But is there anything that you feel like you wish you had known earlier, or that you feel like maybe you would have done differently, or that you would give students advice on now who are just starting to think a little bit about that admission process?
I think for me, a lot of it, I think, went well just because I had a lot of community that kind of like older students that I knew that helped me, gave me their advice. But maybe for something that I could have done a bit differently was researching a bit more about the schools that I was applying to. So I felt like I applied to schools that even if I got in, I wouldn't have ever gone to. And I think that can be just a waste of fees and, money and time. So I think it's very good to research the colleges you're applying to truly know about them, especially if you have a school that, you're on a whim, just like saying you want to go to. So I wouldn't get, swept up in the prestige of a school, or make sure that it's related to you and what you want to go to. Does it really fit who you are? And then also another reason is, don't get swept up in prestige. This is more related to kind of choosing what college you want to go to. But for me, this year I was choosing between UCLA and Berkeley. And although a lot of people were telling me to go to Berkeley just because that's better for engineering, I knew that although I knew Berkeley was ranked better for engineering, it didn't fit me as who I was as a person, and it didn't fit who I wanted to be. And I knew UCLA was a school that I loved everything about, and I knew I wanted to go there. So that's kind of why I chose. So I'd say, start early, as I think before, research the college you're going to, and don't get really swept up in the prestige of a school because it really might not fit you as a person.
Yep. I think that's great advice. I would say one of the things that I take away from this conversation for you is being authentic and pursuing things that are authentically of interest to you, and to get involved. Like if you see something that you want to be involved with, find a way to do it. Just because there's not a program that's assigned to it, or a club that's assigned to it, make your own way. And I think that's just the authenticity comes through within your application fully. And so super excited for you, Muna, and also excited to see what the future holds as you head off to UCLA. So congratulations on your successes, and we look forward to hearing more about those as the future moves on. And thanks so much for taking the time to meet and talk to me and have students hear more about your journey.
Of course. Thank you.
Thanks so much.